welcome to the Behavioural Economics Information Evening run by the BEST Centre, the Behavioural Economics Society and Technology Centre here at QUT. My name is Stephen White and I'm a Research Fellow and Deputy Director for the Centre. I'm going to talk with you a little bit in a second about some of my research. But first, I'd like to kick off by introducing Professor Rebecca Russell-Bennett, who is the co-director of the BEST Centre. She is going to speak with you with Professor Uwe Dulleck, who is the other co-director of the BEST Centre. So please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Well, my name is Uwe Dulleck. I'm a behavioral economist, so if you wonder what that means, you will actually find out during the night that can mean a lot of things. I'm, from my training, a trained economist, and I, for a long time, just looked at how people behave and somehow tried to understand what can we learn for that with respect to government policy, right, in a very broad way. If you just look at a couple of things you can do as a behavioral economist, you can work, for example, with Prime Minister and Cabinet, which I find quite exciting. And actually, the drive for behavioral economics in Australia was, to a large extent, coming out of government being particularly interested to look at the combination of economics and behavioral science. And we have done more work. Like, nobody likes paying taxes, but we enjoyed working with the ATO. And similar type of things. And we just thought we'd talk a little bit about that and give you an idea what behavioral economics is and what you can do in this space. Very quickly, I would like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people as the First Nations owners of the land where we gather today. And in particular, I like this part that we talk about, these were always places of teaching and learning and the exchange of ideas. So tonight is a little bit about meeting us as well. And don't forget, we not only have this official part here, but we also have some drinks and canapes and chances to talk to us directly on level 10, directly after this. So keep your questions because we want to keep this tight and run through. We record it as well. So maybe one or two questions at the end, but not too many. And then let's head up for some refreshments on level 10 and you can really talk to all of us. I think I should have read out all the statement, but you get the idea. And we are really looking forward to meet with you and exchange some ideas. I got tasked to give you very quick histories of behavioral economics, always just 60-second sound bits. How many of you have done some economics in school? Okay, so maybe you have heard the name Adam Smith as one of the forefathers. Interesting enough, before he wrote the first big book that all economists refer to, the Inquiry into the Wealth of Nations, he wrote a book on what I would call now behavioral economics, called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, right? So even he started to try to understand economic incentives, but also already started to think about what are sentiments, what are behavior aspects that drive change. John Maynard Keynes, another big name that you may have heard if you did a little bit of economics before, wrote in the 30s about animal spirits and trying to understand what happens on financial markets. So behavioral finance, another aspect of this field of applying behavioral science to economics and finance. Very early on, there was this type of alternative to, you may have heard about the Homo economicus, this very rational view of how people make decisions, but really looking into, can we get better models about how people behave and what are the implications for policy and recommendations, trying to understand what happens. 60 seconds, I don't know, I think I'm not doing well with time. In the 50s, people start to look at, what would happen if we are not really rational, but are rational about not being rational. That's quite a twist, called bounded rationality, and trying to get insights from that, right? Mainstream was still ultra-rational. And then from then on, I would say we have what is close to the origin of modern behavioral economics, very much driven by looking at experimental evidence. So instead of just thinking about how people behave, can we actually observe how people behave and learn from that? And learn from that with making better policy recommendations, right? And a lot of this was really the later work, was really work that challenged the standard model that mainstream economists work with, but still referring to that. So behavioral economics really tries to bring together both type of aspects, trying to get a better grasp on how people really behave, and at the same time thinking about what's good policy. Very fast forward, Daniel Kahneman, a big name, and what he more or less did is documented lots of biases and thought about how you could explain that. And like, this is not the day to the time to teach you about all of this, but that's maybe a name you heard. The work on behavioral biases and how can we work with that. Plenty of stuff, and you can find out more about it. Usually, what we do, we take some of this work around behavioral biases and try to understand how certain biases affect our behaviors in different areas, right? What happened next? After we found out about biases with a lot of the documentations, these are two men you may have seen at one point in time, or at least, well, this one you may remember, Barack Obama. He actually brought Carl Sunstein, one of the co-authors of the book that actually took these insights into biases, behaviors, human behaviors into public policy by saying, well, if people have systematic biases, how can we use these insights to be smarter about what they call choice architecture or public policy design, right? Design environments, choices environments, how that help people to make better decisions for themselves, and Carl Sunstein usually adds as judged by themselves. So behavioral economics is not about trying to push people into a certain direction, but it is really there to help people to make better decisions for themselves so that they would go for. And a lot of behavioral economics just uses this, what I call the normative power of economics, and combines it with behavioral insights, but then being a protocol, a way to apply this to actually design better policies. I give you another quick 60-second history, and then I hand over to the most exciting part, namely projects. Very early, like about 15 years ago, we started to do behavioral research in the School of Economics and Finance here at QUT. We looked, for example, at well-being, used heart rate monitors to try to find out what makes people to pay taxes. We looked at how experts behave, and are they just chasing their own bucks, or do they are driven by other motives as well? Do we like to be honest? Do we like to be, and what can we say about that? What can we think about that with respect to policy predictions? In 2012, we started to have the first undergraduate units in behavioral economics, and that was the time it all somehow started to move a little bit further into this space to look actually into policy as well. If you remember the checkout, you may find some stuff of our work in the checkout. And then from there on, it's all history. We actually started to work with several government departments and try to make the next steps in that space. A couple of partners from the early times and a couple of type of research successes, and somehow the work was always driven to, on the one hand, look into the science more, push frontiers in knowledge in that space, but work with industry partners to actually find real-world problems. And with all these partners, a lot of this work is not just done by 2 or 3 people you hear talking here, but always by big teams. So we are particularly keen, if you're thinking about what to study soon, it's always opportunities to work with us on some of these projects. And we would hope that some of you maybe come back and think a bit more about that. That's the best center, but we have more chance to talk about that maybe in person, a couple of programs there. That's the way how we do a lot of our research. And the next is, I think we talk about a couple of projects. And I hand over to Rebecca to do some of that.